Good morning, beautiful people. Hope you all are thriving, not just surviving. Today is going to be interesting. We're going to be diving into the money. There's two halves of the equation. There is the spending of the money, then there is the raising of the money. Today, we're just going to look at the spending. The idea behind this live is to make it easy to understand. I actually learned a lot doing this research here, but I'm going to do my best to make it as digestible as possible. So we have a budget, and do we truly know where all of that money goes? Do we truly know how it's being spent? Who is it being spent to benefit? Is it to benefit us as Americans, or is it spent to benefit the wealthy or weapons contractors? I wanted to first start with a little bit of current events. Recently, Elon Musk's DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, good morning, C-Bar, eliminated something called USAID, or they attempted to eliminate it, but they severely defunded it. USAID is a philanthropic organization that does disaster relief, community enrichment, and development, and they do it in different places all over the world. And they do it partially to stop overseas pandemics, diseases. I'm going to ask you all, how much do you think the United States spends through USAID? Before I tell you, before I actually show you what it is, breaking down the numbers, and for those of you who are not going to like the statistics, I'm letting you know I'm getting it from a conservative source. So if you don't like it, then you can lump it. Give me an estimate. 58 million, is that what you said? 50 billion? Okay. 1% of our budget. It's a good guess. 3 billion. Do you want me to go ahead and reveal it? Federal spending for international affairs supports American diplomacy, development aid. It's a small portion of the U.S. budget. It covers agencies such as the State Department, USAID, and the Peace Corps, which are non-military initiatives to work to improve international relations. In fiscal year 2023, when you break down international affairs, comprised about 1% of the total spending in 2023. 1%. So if DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, is trying to do whatever they can to reduce spending, they go after a source that is super, super small as a way of tackling this problem. That's like someone trying to repair the Titanic and focusing only on the smallest little hole in this one obscure area instead of the big gaping gash. Now, I want to break down. There is discretionary spending and there is mandatory spending. There are two pieces of all the spending in government. Discretionary spending includes money for this foreign affairs. It also includes our defense budget. Mandatory spending includes things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, income programs. There's two different sections. We're going to talk about both sections. USAID is a part of discretionary spending. But when you specifically just break this down when adding up discretionary and mandatory, this foreign affairs is only 1%. So international development and humanitarian assistance is allocated to fight global health programs that help fight HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, as well as programs related to maternal and child's health in other countries. Now, of course, you're going to have some people that are the MAGA chest thumpers, seal clappers, that are like, oh, it doesn't benefit America. First off, pause. Doing international development to stop HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, polio, all of these diseases, a disease does not respect geographical borders. They do not respect geopolitical borders. The United States has an interest in trying to stop diseases spreading all around the world. Just to kind of put it in perspective, 21.7 billion. All right, that's for USAID. Do you know how much money that we spend for our actual defense budget? We spent $916 billion on our defense spending. To put that in perspective, that's more than these next 9 countries combined. China, Russia, India, the United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Ukraine, France, and Japan combined. Now, there's a lot of stuff within the defense budget that can be for people, can be for service members, can also be handouts to big weapons contractors like Raytheon or Boeing. Now, how much do we spend on specifically education? We spend $268 billion on education. That's close to only a fifth. We spend almost 5 times the amount on defense as we do for education. When it comes to spending for housing people, how much do we spend? We spend $6.2 billion for public housing operations, $4.7 billion for homeless assistance grants. Put that in perspective. $4.7 billion versus the $916 billion budget. You can see here how the priorities are kind of out of whack. We're spending so much to protect our country, but yet people are living on the streets. What's the point of spending so much to do that when you have people that need our help here at home? Let's talk about VA, Veterans Affairs, homeless programs, $659 million. No, that goes down to millions, not even a billion. $104 million for veterans justice programs. So I guess what I'm getting at is we as Americans don't understand and know our budget very well. And it's highly politicized. Where can I get this data to share? A lot of this data comes from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation. Let's go a little bit further. There are two different big types of federal spending. There's discretionary spending and there's mandatory spending. Here, discretionary and mandatory. Add those two up and you get the $6.1 trillion that we spend. Discretionary spending, the biggest part of that is the defense budget, which back in 2024 was 1.8 billion. Actually, it's 1.8 trillion. Sorry, I apologize. I can't math. Numbers and I don't add up. Now, let's get to mandatory spending. It's a whole nother section. The mandatory spending includes things like Medicare and Medicaid, income security programs, Social Security. It's different from the discretionary. So discretionary spending is determined by an annual basis by Congress and the President through the appropriations process, as opposed to the automatic nature of mandatory spending. Mandatory spending are programs governed by provisions of permanent law and are referred to as mandatory because these mandatory programs are written into the law and do not require annual approvals. This spending is essentially on autopilot unless policymakers change the laws governing the program. Is this all making sense? Let me gloss over just a summary of everything so far. When we're looking at the entire budget, how much does the federal government spend? About $6.2 trillion. That was in fiscal year 2023. That $6.2 trillion is split between discretionary spending and mandatory spending. Discretionary spending includes things like defense. It's determined by an annual basis by Congress and the President through appropriations process, as opposed to the automatic nature of mandatory spending. Discretionary spending must be reviewed and approved each fiscal year. Defense spending represents nearly half of the total discretionary spending. Among major activities funded through appropriations include Homeland Security, education, transportation, research, food safety, science, and space programs, disaster assistance, environmental protection, public housing, and federal law enforcement. You see how defense spending and then all of this other stuff. Defense spending, all of the other stuff includes funding for Homeland Security, all education, transportation, or maybe not all education, I'd have to double check that. Transportation, research, food safety, science, and space program, disaster assistance, environmental protection, public housing, and federal law enforcement. When you go and look at mandatory spending, that's a different chunk. Mandatory spending includes things like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, income security programs. Now, in order to tackle what they deem as wasteful spending, what they are cutting is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP benefits, which is a part of this income security. Income security programs make payments to individuals based on their income through programs including the Earned Income, Child, and Other Tax Credits, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Programs, Supplemental Security Income, payments for disabled children and adults with limited incomes, unemployment compensation, time-limited payments for people who have become unemployed, family support, foster care, child nutrition. So if anything, this section of our mandatory spending is the most pivotal to help working class people, low income people, people of marginalized identities, people who have disabilities to get the assistance they need from the government. Not to say that there isn't going to be waste, fraud, and abuse in that, no. I'm just saying that this section is one of the most important to provide people, citizens, with the programs they need. compared to how much we spend for defense. Just pointing that out. Republicans are focusing on trying to cut SNAP benefits. On Friday, I actually covered a lot of what the Senate did with their budget bill they just passed. So for those people who do not know, the Senate just passed a $340 billion budget. Part of this budget was slashing programs like SNAP. Republican senators pushed a $340 billion budget framework passage early Friday, chugging through an all-night session in Democratic opposition. Democrats attempted to push for amendments to the budget, and I'm going to show you what those amendments are. Among Democratic amendments, Senate Republicans rejected during the all-night voting session were proposals against legislation that would cut funding for school lunch and school breakfast programs. When you go and actually look at the actual legislation, the actual amendments, Republican politicians, this was to create a point of order in saying we are against legislation that would cut funding for school lunch and school breakfast programs. You see 49 yays, 51 nays. What this means is that Republicans are for cutting programs to feed children. They don't think that it is a good addition to the budget. I shouldn't have to say it, but feeding kids is like, it's something that should be done. It's so minuscule when it comes to any sort of federal spending whatsoever. Yet, apparently feeding children is not a priority for Republicans. Now, I need to get going here soon. So I appreciate every single one of you. Just remember that you are beautiful, you are loved, you are valid, you are strong, and you are fierce. Don't let anyone, thank you to everyone saying you are, or anything, ever, 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 ever. Thank you, Joanna Tech, you're awesome. Dim your shine. I love you all so much. Bye.